Well, hello there, YouTube. Thanks for coming back. This is Mr. Gibson Guy, and today I have a video I've been planning on doing for about half a year now. And today is a rainy Saturday, and we're stuck inside. It's cold and miserable out, and I just happened to get the right amount of equipment, I think, in here to do this presentation of this video. Got a new shipment that came in today, and before I sell it and it moves back out again, I wanted to use these props here on this particular video that I've wanted to do. And from the title, if you saw it, you see that this is a presentation of how Canon revolutionized how cameras were made with the Canon A series. Now, for decades I've been a Nikon photographer back all the way to the 80s, and Canon, usually it's like you're either a Nikon guy or you're a Canon guy. The Canon people and the Nikon people didn't really have too much to do with each other for some reason, and that's kind of the way things divided up in the days. But nowadays, I have a lot of Nikon stuff, but I picked up a couple of Canon accessories and pieces, and now I kind of have a collection of them. They come in and they go out pretty quickly. There seems to be in today's market quite a considerable interest in Canon cameras, particularly the AE-1, to the point where it's got me questioning it a little bit, because back in the day when they came out with these cameras, the Canon A1 was the flagship considered of the Canon cameras, and it was an offshoot developed from the AE-1, but everybody could get an AE-1. If you were really somebody, you could get an A1. And now AE-1s sell for more than A1s, which really surprised me when I got back involved with photography and saw what the current market is on cameras. And so things kind of went a little bit crazy, because the AE-1 was considered just a common camera. Lots of people had it. It wasn't very expensive. But the A1 was top of the line. And now they kind of switched the two, which just seems kind of odd to me. But while we're talking about this, how big of an effect did they have? Before the Canon AE-1, cameras were made like the Nichromat FTN. And they were big, heavy, and very intricate to assemble. That means that it made them expensive. It took skilled workers a long time to build a Nichromat or any of the mechanical cameras at the time. Well, Canon changed all that with their A series, and it's of interesting note that we realize what Canon did with developing their new series and what they avoided when they did their new series. With the new A series, plastics, top of the camera, plastics replaced brass. Electronics replaced mechanics, and simplified assembly improved production and lowered labor cost. So Canon was set up to start producing a lot of cameras with their A series cameras. And they figured they could produce them much cheaper because they're going to mass produce them. But they had to have something else if they were going to do that, and that is they had to have new camera buyers, new photographers. So Canon financed a huge advertising campaign to establish a 35mm camera as the common accessory every man of means and taste should carry with him. Like, we're going to make everybody a photographer. Recently, just before when the AE-1 was starting to be developed, automatic exposure control was a fairly new development that was very popular because it simplified the f-stops and shutter speed business that you had to learn as a photographer. A lot of people found that too intimidating. And then when you just kind of set a couple things and the camera took care of the rest, it didn't seem so scary. And best of all, if you got people started getting better exposures, they start thinking more of themselves as photographers. And the more they think of themselves as photographers, the more cameras they buy, the more photography they do. Hey, look, my pictures came out. I used to just get my thumb. Now I get pictures and I can tell what they are. So that was a very big deal. Canon saw the potential for that with the automatic exposure, aperture priority, shutter speed priority, whatever it was, that simplified photography for the neophyte beginning photographer. And look, honey, I just got my first roll of film back and all the pictures came out. Oh, that's great, honey. You're just a real pro photographer. So Canon had to push that, and they did. They came up with brilliant advertising campaigns, and people all over the place were looking for Canon cameras because that's what everybody was using in the advertisements. Canon also branched out from the traditional cameras are bought in camera store idea. Back in the 60s, you had to find a place that had a camera store to buy a camera. But Canon, and kind of joined by Minolta, I think, they changed things around. They revolutionized how cameras were distributed, how you get a camera. Of course, you could buy a mail order, from out of magazine catalogs and stuff, but most places weren't big enough to support a camera store. So what Canon did was they worked with Sears Roebuck, J.C. Penney, Montgomery Ward, and even Kmart to establish photo departments in the department stores. We never saw Nikon or Canon cameras in a department store until the mid and late 1970s. Then all of a sudden they were appearing all over the place. And that meant you could be in the department store picking out a new sport jacket, wanting to look smart in front of everybody, and right next to the sport jackets there was the camera department, and you could pick out your SLR, which was the accessory that every well-dressed man carried with him right over his shoulder. Just like a lady would have a purse hanging from her shoulder, a guy would have a camera on a strap, and he'd take it with him wherever he went. And we started seeing cameras everywhere, and it started from this advertising campaigns. So now Canon can produce cameras which there are a lot of people that want them, and they're reasonably priced, and they're going to be successful with them because the camera pretty much does it on its own, doesn't take much input from the photographer, and so everybody wants to be a photographer. And then you start seeing 1 hour photo places in every drugstore, and every corner you're finding it because there's so much photography going on. And it's in these days of digital cameras and everything going onto your computer or your phone or your iPad or what have you, on your device. They don't have people going to the drugstore. I went into the drugstore recently to get a roll of film developed, and I had to kind of take the girl through the whole thing because she worked there, but she didn't have any clue what to fill out on that envelope. So I kind of showed her how everything works, and we took it from there. But she said, "Why would you do that? Your camera's in your phone, isn't it?" Different time, different days. All right, now let's look at the A series. The A series was numerous different cameras, all built on a common platform. Canon eschewed the latest technological advances and instead incorporated establishing features that were common in the day, combined with reliability and ease of use. So Canon designed cameras that you could be successful with without having too much idea what you were doing. With this AE-1 that I just got, it came with the old handbooks that came out with it. This is the handbook for the AE-1. This is part 1, and then it goes to part 2. But they actually have like a comic book here that with actual drawings and bubbles there to tell you the words, that teaches you how to use your Canon AE-1. And then it goes through pictures and diagrams and all that stuff. And so it's like step by step how to be successful with your new camera. Canon did a beautiful job of doing that stuff. And this part 2 actually starts to look like a photographer book, because they figure by then you'll be up on this stuff and you're ready for some of the trickier things. And you get a separate one for your speed light. 177. So Canon has got photographers coming into the market. Canon has the cameras that they want, and they're just building them. Canon recognized the commercial potential for not just interchangeable lenses, but also flash units, auto winders / motor drives, data backs, camera cases, camera bags, and many more essential accessories the dedicated photographer needed to have with him. You see, when you saw that display case at Sears and Roebuck, you didn't just see the camera. You saw the auto winder that went with it. The A1 came with or can be situated with a motor drive with a separate battery pack. Any of these cameras, all the A cameras, worked with the flash units, and you can connect that to your camera, as well as lots of lenses. 28mm, 100mm, macro. Oh no, this is a 135mm. This is a 100mm. Wow, look at that. That goes deep in there. And the latest one that I just added here, this one is really exciting to include in the whole list. This is the Canon, here it is, Canon FD 200mm f2.8. Take this filter off. This 72mm filter thread. Yeah, look at the front element on that, and that's something. Of course, it's got an attached lens shade. This is a very cool lens. I can't wait to have a sunny day and I can get out there and use it. So there's lots of accessories you can get for your Canon camera. So you can keep returning to the department store and they have them there. Why not? People will buy them if they can get them. So distribution is important. The A series were an astonishing assortment. No, not astonishing. I didn't say that. Were an assortment of consumer cameras in many different flavors that made the amateur feel like he was a pro. Canon A1 was not a professional grade camera. It was no different than the A1. They're all very similar. But it gave you the most features, and it was dressed up like it was a pro camera. And it only came in black. All the other ones you got in chrome or black. But the A1 was serious. It was in professional black only. So Canon introduced the plastic and electronic camera for every man. All the other manufacturers had to either follow Canon into the future or get left behind. During its 8.5-year production run, Canon produced 6.5 million AE-1 cameras, to the exclusion of all the other A-series cameras. Now let me finish with the breakdown here, not of the sold ones, but of when they appeared. The AE-1 was first introduced in April 1976. Then in December of 1976, Canon introduced the AT-1. The AE-1 was an auto exposure with manual can override camera. It's the general type of camera of the day of 76. And it had the shutter speed priority auto exposure, where the photographer set the shutter speed and the camera selected the aperture. So that's shutter speed priority. Next, it came the AT-1, which was the most odd of all of the A-series cameras. The AT-1 was a match needle, similar to the AE-1, all manual exposure camera. It did not have shutter priority or aperture priority. It had a match needle in it, similar to what's in the AE-1, but it was all manual control. The camera didn't set anything. But it was an all-electronic camera. Usually well, not usually, but always, all the manual cameras were mechanical as far as the shutter speed and aperture. Well, the aperture setting was on the focusing, the aperture ring, but this was a twist to the old match needle mechanical cameras, the manual cameras. This was a manual, all-electronic camera, because Canon made these things, so all they had to do was change a couple of components inside the camera, and it made it an AE-1 or an AT-1 or an AE-1. The next camera out was in 2 years to the date after the AE-1 was the A1. That's this one we were talking about. It came out in April of 1978. 76, December of 76, and April 78 for the A1. And the A1 was the throw everything at it camera. It had aperture priority, shutter priority, and program mode to it, as well as manual exposure. And then there was flash, and they managed to turn the number 3 into 6 real fast. But so basically that's the idea. Then a year and a month later, in May of 1979, they came out with the AV1, which was sort of a response to the AE1. The original one was shutter priority, where the camera selected the aperture, and the AV1 was aperture priority, where the photographer selected the aperture and the camera selected the shutter speed. This aperture priority is what most of all the other companies made. Canon made the shutter speed priority, where the camera sets the aperture, but that was hardly seen on anything other than cameras that are multi-mode, like the A1. But the other manufacturers, mostly they thought that the aperture priority made the most sense, but Canon did it differently. They started with the shutter speed priority. Then we skip up 1 month short of 2 years. In April, they liked April releases apparently. In April of '81, they released the AE-1 program. And this is interesting. The AE-1 program is sort of an AE-1, and it has more of an A1 in it in addition. And so it's really a more technical, better camera. But nowadays, if you go shopping online or eBay or something like that, you're going to find that the AE-1 is going to go for the most money. The AE-1 program, the A1, the AV1, they're all going to be lower priced. The AE-1 program was like $100 more than an AE-1 at the time, in the day, back when they made it, and now it's probably $100 less, because it's not an AE-1. Everybody has to have the original, that one, rather than something that was better. Anyway, that's just my view of it. So we got the AE-1 in April of '81. Then, and this is a rare one, the AL-1. And I'm not sure if, I think it was based on the AV-1, which was the shutter priority camera. But the AL-1, which was introduced in not April but March of 1982, so 11 months after the AE-1 program, the AL-1 was a auto exposure camera that gave focus confirmation within the viewfinder. That means that in the viewfinder there was an arrow pointing up and an arrow pointing down, and it would analyze the focusing that you did and tell you to lower it or to raise it, to change the focus to what the eye in the camera. It's a pre-autofocus idea that that the AL-1 gave you automatic exposure and gave you corrected focus. That means that it took what you did and said, no, it needs to be a little closer or a little bit further off. Okay, and then it would line up and say, there you go, that's it, that's the correct exposure. And that is the end, 82, of the series. Then in 84, they came out with their T70 or something like that. They started, everything went into autofocus after that. So that was the beginning of the modern camera, plastic and electronic, and with more automation in it. And they developed, these were made so they still look like cameras of the day. The next series after the A series, they went to cameras that looked like they were blobs of plastic. And that's where we leave off here. I hope you found this interesting. If you're interested in more information on the Canon A series, if you have a question, write it in the comments here. Give me a like, and I appreciate some few more subscriptions there, just about there. And thank you for watching this. I hope you enjoyed the program and you learned something about the importance of the Canon A series. So until next time, this is Mr. Gibson Guy, and I will see you later.